Hey, welcome to the 412 podcast. My name is Shay.
My name's Tyler, and our heart behind this podcast is to equip youth pastors, youth leaders, families, and students to do the work that God has called us to build up the church, and to create maximum kingdom impact.
All right, and welcome back to the 412 podcast. My name is Shay. I am one of the co-hosts of the show, and with me, as always, is my friend Tyler. Tyler, how you doing today, man?
I'm good. What's up, 412 Nation? I got my coffee. Got that rocking
Nice.
and rolling. The sun is shining outside. It's a good day.
I have orange juice. I'm not allowed to be drinking coffee, at least for the first couple weeks of this new workout I'm on. They tell me to cut out coffee, which is kind of sad because I love coffee. So it pains me to not have to drink it. So
Man,
it's tough, but
sounds like a wrong workout to be doing.
yeah, after the first couple weeks, they say you can go back into it, but it's just black coffee I'm allowed to drink. No creamer or anything like that, which that's fine. I drink coffee black anyways, unless it's a fancy-dancy cup of coffee that I get. So,
Which now you got to sit through a 45-minute line at Starbucks or whatever.
yeah, I don't I think 3 weeks ago might have been the last time I went out to get coffee, and that was at Caribou. I think I went to get it, and the line was, I think I waited there like 25 minutes in line because the cars were just coming all the way out into the main road, so it was pretty bad.
Yep, that's the world we live in right now.
Yeah, well, Tyler, last night was ministry night for us.
Mm-hmm.
I know I had ministry night. I think you did as well. So what did you guys do last night? What did last night look for you guys?
Yeah, so we wrapped up our series we have been doing through the Grow curriculum, the Doubt It series. It's been really good, talking about questions and how do we deal with these questions. And so last night I encouraged the students to surround themselves with godly people. And I love the imagery. It's something I'm working on even just in my own thought processes. What does it look like to circle ourselves with godly people? And so talking about that, really kind of beginning to develop that in my mind as something, a strategy that I'm trying to begin to work into the ministry of what does it look like to circle yourself with people, godly people in different roles, right? Like we all need cheerleaders, we need coaches, we need mentors, we need pastors, we need, all these different types of people. And so, it was a good night last night. We played Nailed It or Failed It. If you haven't played that game,
Nice.
Oh, it's a solid one. The kids really dug it. They were really into it, and it was a good night. Zoom fatigue aside, we had a good showing of people, and kids stuck around after in their small groups. And so, yeah, it was a great night. How about you, man? What did you guys do?
Yeah, so we had actually a smaller showing this past week, which is fine. There's a lot of Zoom fatigue. I actually have a couple students who are in the midst of moving, so they don't have internet at their new house. So I'm wondering how that all works for them with, they have school that relies on internet. So not having internet, I feel like that puts them, really far behind. So it's kind of an interesting spot. But last night was kind of a smaller night. We started at 6 and we were done by about 6:40. They didn't really care too much to, want to just look at the screen and just talk and everything, which is fine. So I was able to connect with them for a little bit, which was really cool. But I mean, really the cool thing is I just try to text and keep up with my students throughout the week. So even if we don't do Zoom or we miss a Zoom during the week, I'm still communicating and talking with them. So they know that I'm still present. The youth group is still present, and that, really, I'm just longing for the day that we can get back together. Hopefully we get some good news today from the governor. I don't know what that looks like.
Right.
I mean, even if he were to say, we can go back to smaller group meeting, which I didn't know what the perks of a small youth group were until this time. So
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm trying to think.
Then I wouldn't be able to start meeting until the end of the month because I would want to make sure I had plans, policies in place, and then my leaders know those plans and policies, and then I can reiterate those to the students before they come. And
Yeah,
it's even then that tough spot of, you don't want to disencourage them from inviting a friend, but at the same time, you don't want to have them invite friends. So,
sitting at the door with a clicker. Nope, you're 11. You're done. Out. Get.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a tough spot, especially since we've all started that talk of reopening church. And I think my pastor is actually wanting the youth group to be the first people to
Yeah.
reopen the church since we're smaller,
Yep.
to help
I'm finding
there.
that too with us. I feel like I'm kind of the guinea pig in a lot of ways in a lot of the things we're doing. Actually, Vanderblumen, which I think you posted something on Facebook and someone commented with it, but
Yeah.
Vanderblumen is doing these like webinars. And
Yes.
today is April 30th. Happy birthday, 25th birthday to my sister Tori. Today is April 30th, and they're doing a like a Q&A with a bunch of kids pastors and youth pastors talking about what
Cool.
does family ministry look like coming back on. That's 1 p.m. Central today. So I encourage, like, I'm going to be logging into that and checking it
I'll
out.
definitely have to check that one.
Um,
I didn't know that was happening,
yeah,
but
yeah, 1 o'clock today. It's over their Facebook. So it was Vanderblumen. I
okay.
think that's how you
Yeah.
say it,
So
right? Vanderblumen. I don't
yeah,
know.
I think that's who it is.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know I have I get his I've signed up for his blog, so I get a email from him like once a week or once a
Yep.
day. Maybe I don't know how
Not
often it
quite Carrie Newhoff where you get 2 or 3 a day, you know?
right, right. But I mean, these are interesting times we're in. This is, the conversations I'm having. So my pastor actually encouraged me, talk with your students about it. Where do they feel? So I actually have after this recording, I'm actually going to call one of my kids' parents, probably one of the more not conservative parents, but one of the
Cautious?
more cautious parents. That's a good
Yeah.
way to put it.
Yeah.
One of the more cautious parents. So I'm going to start with this parent and just talk to her. Say, what would you like to see? What would make you nervous? Would you prefer to do it this way? And just start. So I'm in that process of just gaining feedback from my
Mm,
parents because here's the thing. People can post all about how it's not just because you can go back doesn't mean you should.
right.
Is it the safest to go back? Listen, on a blanket statement, you should take all those things into account, but also understand if you have a smaller youth group like me, you could reach out to parents and figure out, all my parents are okay with this. If I have these policies and whatnot in place, we can do this. So,
Right.
there's just a lot of planning and preparation. So I was even talking to the students about that last night too, about,
Mm.
what would that look like for you guys? So
Yeah,
they can
and see
get
and
feedback.
see, we're in a trickier place, with you've got about 10 to 15 students.
Yeah.
We run between 80 to 100 students. I mean, obviously that number's
Right.
been down since we've been on Zoom, but like for us, we're going, okay, it's a long time until we actually are going to be able to like meet in person.
Right.
I don't know what that is. I hear some people say midsummer, some people say in the fall. I'm even thinking like, okay, what are we going to do if come fall we can't actually meet?
Right.
Like in large settings or whatever. And so
Right.
we actually, and I know this is not even what we were going to talk about in the podcast, but this is actually really good. But just thinking about, I talked with my leaders and we started rolling out earlier this month. I actually reached out to a handful of parents that, through our database, I did this search to where I found all the parents that are within 5 minutes of our church. So we live,
Oh, nice.
where our church is, we're kind of centrally plopped in kind of like this like a pretty centralized location right off the highway, everything like that. So it's
Yeah.
super nice. But I emailed parents and I was looked for in kind of our neighborhood. We kind of live, we're right on a golf course. And so like right in our location, there's even walking distance or whatever. I said, hey parents, if we can safely do it, right? So following all guidelines, everything like that, if we can safely do it, could we do some house groups, where it's basically
Mm,
groups of 10, small groups. Most of our small groups run about 8 to 10. We have some that are smaller, and we have one. Our seventh grade girl group is like there's like 20 of them, so they're like everywhere.
nice.
And so like trying to figure out how we can safely do that or whatever. And I had parents that were like, absolutely, we'll even provide snacks and things like that. And so we're actually kind of moving forward, providing, our stay-at-home order is lifted and everything like that. Um, of actually beginning to do creating small group materials. And so like a video that we're going to put out on YouTube, and then small group leaders can watch it. And then we use the Grow app, and it has all of our questions on there. So I don't have to get questions out to parents or to leaders. It's all right through the phone that I can just save and push out. And so it's super nice to be able to decentralize when we need to.
Right.
And then also, of course, we have some families that are just not comfortable with their kids
Mhm.
being around a bunch of people or anything, which is totally understandable, and we don't want to exclude anyone. And so we actually are going to continue our Zoom meetings
Oh, nice.
And so as the leaders are leading, myself or my staff, one of us will be hosting a Zoom meeting. So for anybody that's like, or just can't even make a small group, right? Maybe they don't have a ride or whatever it is. Um, but we essentially have it set up to where a parent who has 3 kids in the youth group can drop a kid off, drop a kid off, drop a kid off in less than 10 minutes. And
Yeah.
so it took a ton of, like, it was like a puzzle. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
But,
sure. I bet.
yeah, so I rolled that out yesterday with my leaders officially, like, I
That's
should
cool.
say officially, providing things move forward. So,
Yeah.
I'm excited about the opportunity. Um,
This afternoon is a very big
it is.
milestone, I guess is how we could say. It's a big milestone on, what's going to happen. Is this a direction we can go, or is it cannot? Because if you look up on, what the news outlets are saying, the news outlets, you get both directions. So you have
Yeah.
no clue what's coming until the governor gets up there. So that's real cool to hear that you guys are planning. You have a nice little plan in place. It actually reminds me a lot of what Elevation Youth is doing with their youth groups.
Mm,
Because I think they do that house church model, and then they come together once a month to meet. So that's really cool.
yeah.
Well, Tyler, I think we have a really cool topic. It's maybe one that fits in the toolbox, specifically not for students, but for maybe a youth pastor toolbox or a leader toolbox. But what I want to talk about today is when you get that call. And that call I'm talking about is the one from your senior pastor, or executive pastor, whoever it is that does it. And they say, hey, we want you to preach.
Hmm.
Now, for me in a smaller church setting, I probably get more opportunities to preach than some, maybe even you, Tyler, in a bigger setting, you might be able to speak into that. But Tyler, I know you had the opportunity to speak in big church last week.
Hmm.
I'm actually speaking in big church this week. We've been doing drive-in services, so it's going to be extremely weird to get up there. I keep thinking my pastor looks like a politician because he gets up on this platform with a microphone and he starts like waving to all the cars. So I'm like this just reminded me of a politician. Like he's just going to give some speech or something. So it'll be a different and interesting. But what I thought would be a really cool topic for us to talk about today is, man, what does that look like when we get that call? How do we prepare everything from how we run and interact youth group to how we personally prepare to how we get ready on, Sunday and deliver? Do we get there early? Do we do
Hmm.
same time on Sunday? What does that look like? So, Tyler, I'll let you start, man. What is your, let's start with personal preparation. You get that
Yeah.
call. Maybe you get a topic. For me, this past week, I found out on Sunday I was preaching the next Sunday, so I didn't have too much of a time. And usually, my pastor says to me, "Preach whatever you want to preach. You don't
Yeah.
have to. You don't have to stay in the series if you don't want to." So, what does your personal preparation look like for you when you get that call?
Yeah. So my pastor is actually pretty good about getting me my preaching calendar, preaching dates out pretty far in advance. Typically 3 to 4 weeks, which is super helpful. And
To be fair, my pastor does that too. He just randomly is like, "Dude, I'm really tired and I
yeah,
need help this next week." So I'm
yeah,
like,
we're in weird
"Okay,
times. We're in weird times. But
right."
yeah, so he usually gets me the information. Sometimes it's in the middle of series, and other times it's just standalones. I actually prefer when it's in a series.
As
Um,
do I.
because standalone is great, um, except when, like, you like have those writer block moments, right? Like, oh man, I don't know which direction to go, or anything like that. Usually on standalone, a lot of times I will take a general concept of a message we've done with youth and then formulate it out to,
Mm.
like, bigger church. And so, my illustrations go bigger to, like, more broad to everybody. And so typically I spend the first, if I have enough advance notice, right? I usually try to spend a week or two in study, like personal reflection study. So I'm,
Mm.
like, internalizing, kind of what it is. I'm talking through it with my wife, talking through with it. Like, I'm a verbal processor. So I'm trying to talk to as many people as possible about the topic. And then I'm kind of trying to get the idea of where do I want to land the plane, right?
Mm.
Like, not what are my points going to be or anything like that, but ultimately, if a person walks away with one truth out of my message, what do I want them to walk away with? And then out of that you can kind of begin to develop the points. And so I actually I love Communicating for a Change by Andy
Awesome book.
Stanley is a great book that helps with understanding. And his whole premise really is you wouldn't go on a road trip without knowing your destination first. And so
Right.
he a lot of times starts with the destination, right? Like, I am going here, and then you can begin to map out and figure out, what road, detours you're going to take and things like that.
Mhm.
But if you still know where you're going, then you're going there. So we were in a series right now called Crucial Questions, and it's asking what are the crucial questions. And mine was essentially purpose, right? What is our purpose or things? And originally I started out going, okay, how can I work in, the spiritual gifts? Because those, I think, help us figure out purpose. But then I was like, man, I feel like God is going, no, we got to go like as a whole. What is our purpose as mankind, as humans? And so really tackled that question of what is the purpose of my life, and came out with the 3 points. Purpose of our life is to glorify God, to make him to know God, to glorify God, and to make him known. And so really it was a broad sweeping challenge to our church of, hey, even in the midst of COVID-19, be the church, because our purpose has not changed. Our strategies have changed, but our purpose has never changed.
Right.
And then I challenged our congregation to share their hope in Jesus. We call it hashtag My Purpose, My Story. And I think I challenged you, and we did it. You did it too.
Yeah.
So, but just challenge them to, hey, in a short 60-second, minute, whatever. I had one guy do 10 minutes, which isn't quite short, but like, hey, go and share how Jesus has changed your life. What was your
Right.
life like before Jesus? What was it like when you met Jesus? And what's your life like now? And so challenge people to do it, and they're starting to come slowly but surely. And I don't know. I love challenges or like action points for people in their messages to like
Yeah.
take out. So the week of my message, I know I'm rambling at this point, but the week of my message is usually I manuscript,
Okay.
even though I don't read it. I manuscript out pretty much most of my messages. That's something I've learned to do in the last couple of years. I used to be a outline guy, like a couple few points and then just go
Hmm.
off. But I've become more of a manuscript because it's getting my thoughts out on paper. And then once I've written them down, it's a lot easier for me to retain and remember. And so Monday, Tuesday of preaching week is a lot of writing and thinking through, taking all the things that I've taken the past couple of weeks, putting them on paper. And then Wednesday, Thursday are retain and refine. And then on Saturdays, I always take an hour or two to just basically read it through a couple times, even talk it out and whatnot. And then I get to
Nice.
church early and spend some time praying and just getting ready. And I always walk out on stage, and I have a prayer that I walk out on stage to. Is basically I just go, God, give me your fill my mind with the things that you want me to say. Help me to smell the sweet smell of the gospel. Help me to speak only your words. Help me to hear what you have for me. May my eyes be ever pure, and may my heart be forever yours. And so I just
Mm.
kind of go through that. It's just kind of like like Kevin Garnett's smacking the powder. LeBron does that too. It's kind of my thing of just orienting my heart to be ready to give the message, because I don't want it to be my message. I want it to be God's. So yeah, that's uh that's what I
That's
do.
awesome.
How
That's
about
awesome.
you?
Yeah. I mean, I don't really have too much of a of a I guess a ritual, like step-by-step process that I do each time. Usually I prefer to stay like you. I prefer to, stay in the series, to be given a series kind of thing. But we've spent about 6 or 7 weeks now in James and just chapter 1 alone. And so my pastor was like, I think we need a break from James. And
Mhm.
you provide a good breath of fresh air sometimes, being younger than most of the church, 98% of the church. So I was like, and that 2% being my wife and one other girl who shows up. So, but he's like, so just speak whatever you want. So I'm like, man, so I get this call. I get told this on Sunday. I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. So usually what I do when I get asked to preach a standalone is the first thing I go to is, what am I reading in my devotions?
Mm.
Is there anything standing out, that really just jumps out at me that I'm like, oh, this one I want to communicate to our church? And so Uh, no, I went through my devotions. I'm going through John, and I just finished with Nehemiah, and nothing really, jumped out at me. So I'm like, man, there's nothing there. And then I get a text from my worship pastor. Hey, what are you speaking on this week? This is on Monday, the day after. What are you speaking on so I can, prepare and get songs ready? I'm like,
Jesus.
I was like, I got nothing yet. I just found out yesterday, so I just need some like time to process. And so, usually, if nothing in my devotions jumps out, I spend about a time in an hour or so in just silent. I'm not saying anything. Just let God fill my desires. And sometimes stuff just jumps right out to me, and I'm like, oh, this direction I want to go. But sometimes it doesn't. This Monday it did not. So then my next step is not now. I'm not stealing someone's sermon, but I'll go through all the famous pastors that I like to listen. So for me, it's JD Greer and Matt Chandler. Like those are the top two guys I love to listen to. So I'll go through. Are they saying anything that jumps out to me? I went through their stuff. Nothing jumped out to me.
Mm,
I'm like, what in the world am I going to speak on, God? Like usually taking those three steps, I find something to,
mm,
just like you said, a destination
yeah.
is really what I'm looking for. I still haven't found a destination. So I go back to my devotions. I'm just like randomly flipping through the Bible, and I get to Second Corinthians. And so I read Second Corinthians 5 about how we have a new life in Christ, and essentially we have a new purpose in Christ. And at that moment, my pastor calls me and he says, Shay, I know what I want you to speak on. He goes, I know I told you stand alone, and it's still going to be stand alone, but I want you to talk about our purpose.
Hello.
I was like, okay. So I went back to, because I saw your message on Sunday, Tyler. I was like, hold up. I went back to your message, rewatched it again. Don't worry, I did not. I am going to steal your My Purpose, My Story thing.
Do it.
Make sure that hashtag
Get it
gets
out there.
popular. It'll be kind of interesting to see some old people do that. But so I am going to go that direction with actually purpose again, but take it from a Second Corinthians 5 route, which interesting enough reminded me, I'm like, I just spoke this to the youth group
Mm,
the very first week that we went into quarantine. So I went back to that message and I was able to expand it out into that more, I guess, adult, big churchish kind of setting.
sure.
So,
More swear words when you say adult, right? Like
right.
more swear words. Yeah.
Right. Actually, no, I feel like I have to tone a lot of stuff down because I use a lot of examples that or say a lot of
Man.
things that the kids would understand. Like I even get up there, like I remember this a little side note real quick, but I remember I got up to preach one time and I was like, oh, I got this. I forget the story I used, but I mentioned the word, it's pretty dope.
Yeah.
I knew what that meant. All the kids knew what that meant. I had a couple of older people come up to me and go, why were you talking about drugs being pretty in your
Yeah.
sermon? I was like, what are you talking about?
That's
I'm like, they were like, you said pretty dope. And I was like, listen, you got to understand what pretty dope means. So I found out that because of that, I have to actually tone back a lot of what I say and really just say things just as they are. Like instead
yeah.
of saying, hey, that's pretty dope, I got to say, this is awesome. So that's usually what my process looks like, whether that's, a couple weeks in advance or a week in advance is just going through all that. And then I spend time meditating over the scripture. And then I actually manuscript my sermon 3 different times. And the
Awesome.
reason I do it, so I write it out, I read it, I rewrite it. Literally, like I'll just start typing it word for word what I have. But I do that 3 times because it gets stuck into my
Hmm.
head. And so now I'm able to get up there and I don't necessarily have to keep going back to that manuscript.
Yeah, that's good.
And then I'll give it a run through usually on Saturday for about an hour or so. And I usually try to keep my messages between 25 and 30 minutes because my pastor usually goes 35 to 40. So I like to say, if I'm going to get up there and preach, I just want to keep it short and concise kind of thing like that. Because as one of my friends said, he loved it because I got up there and said, I got some homework for you guys. I don't say homework instead of challenge. But it's essentially the same thing. And my friend, he came to visit me and we were having Culver's afterwards. He was laughing. He's like, dude, you just gave a bunch of 60-year-old people homework. He goes, do you
Yes.
understand? Like, what in the world do you think you're doing?
And they
And
were like, that's pretty dope.
yeah, right. And so usually people go out and, they do most of what I say. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens. So
I think it's so important to issue that. I mean, we talk about that in youth ministry
yeah,
all the time, right? It's so important to issue those challenges and those not just so people go out and do things, but really like it builds this culture of like, I think a lot of times in churches we have a lot of people that agree with things in principle, right?
Hmm.
But not in action. And
Right.
I think that like, if we really believe what we're teaching, right, is like, so like I do, and I know you do too, right? If we believe whatever, it should drive us to change. Our belief, our understanding of what Jesus did on the cross, our understanding
Hmm.
of what God has done in our life, it should drive us to action. Again, not that
Right.
action is what saves us, right? We would never teach that. We would never teach that it's our actions that save us. But our actions are a result or a sign of our salvation. And
Right.
I think that is not a, a like, we need to be teaching those kind of things. Um I wrote a blog post not too long ago on I called it the second cross, right? How a lot of times we love the idea of Jesus on the first cross, right? Because he's taking away our sins. It's for our
Right.
salvation. There's nothing that we have to do to earn it. But then Jesus says, if you want to follow me, take up your cross and follow me, right?
Mhm.
Like if you want to be my disciples, take up your cross and follow me. And a lot of times, especially the church in America, we have a really hard time with that second cross,
Mhm.
right? Of taking it up and following after Jesus, putting aside ourselves. And that's what challenges, and that's what issuing like these action steps in messages are so important.
Right.
That's why we do it in student ministry,
Right.
right? That's why I think we need to do it in every area of going, okay,
Mhm.
let's take what I know and put it into action, because that's belief.
Right.
Right? I can say that I believe if I sit in that chair, it'll hold me up. But if I never sit in the chair, do I really believe it'll hold me up?
Right. The reason, so one of my students always asks me, why do you always give us something to do or a challenge to do? And what I like to tell them is, I'm giving you guys a reason to listen to me.
Mm,
At least you're at least listening for what I'm going to do in the end. I go, when you go to school, you get homework. Why are you doing homework? You're just doing homework. Yes, it's helping you get a better grade and stuff like that. But for the most part, you just listen to the teacher to listen to the teacher. Right. It'll get you somewhere, but there's not, a huge like action driven point to why you're necessarily learning algebra or
mm,
history or whatever like that. Whereas when you come to church, like there is an action driven purpose. Like we are supposed to bear fruit. And so one of the best ways to bear fruit is by letting me say, here's what you guys can tangibly start to do. It's not me that's going to do this for you. It's not your parents that's going to do this for you, but it's you that's going to have to do this for you. So here's
yeah.
something, and it's always something small. It's never something astronomical that's going
Yeah.
to
Move
like
to
change.
Africa.
Right. I, I, I don't know if I'll ever tell anyone to do something crazy like that. Actually, I can't say that. Never say never. Right.
Yeah,
So,
right. The second you say never is when God's like,
right.
okay, I want you to call this person. Yeah.
Right. But for the most part, I try to keep it at something real simple. So that's why I really loved, what you did with the purpose part.
Yeah.
Share your story in 1 minute. And if you have TikTok, you can't go more than a minute anyway. So you
I,
got to learn how to use it. So, I mean, that's just a really short, simple, practical way that, the whole family can get together and share their story as a family. You can do it individually. Like there's just so many different ways that you can possibly go about doing this. So, I just think it's a really awesome opportunity that we have at the church to be able to challenge people to actually do something with their faith. So,
yeah. No, it's huge. That's
Tyler, you had a really good takeaway point for this, though, that I thought you should share. So, as a youth pastor, what do we do? Do we still have youth group? Just run youth group normal? Do we cancel youth group altogether? Do we get a guest speaker to come in that week? What do we do with youth group? What do you like to do with youth group
yeah.
when you know that you're coming up to a Sunday that you're going to be sharing and speaking?
Well, and this is really relevant right now to my life too, because my pastor is about to go on sabbatical, and so because I'm on the preaching team, I'm going to be taking over the next 8 weeks of the summer, or 8 weeks in the summer. I'm going to be preaching for the eight, 3 of the 8, and so like trying to think through what that's going to look like. And so I have the luxury. So like take this for what it's worth, right? I have the luxury of I have some staff, and so I'm empowering my staff, but So a lot of times if I'm preaching, I'll have one of my other staff do the teaching that week, or take on some responsibilities and stuff like that. And really, if you're in a smaller setting, you don't have staff, whatever, like this is a great opportunity for you to equip your leaders or a student. Like if you have a student that's capable of teaching a lesson or whatever, man, like empower them to go
Yeah,
and do that, and to set them up. And again, if you know you're preaching, you're going to need to give a little bit more lead time than maybe a week before for someone who doesn't do it on a regular basis. And so a little
right.
hack, like if you know, as soon as you know, man, go right to, okay, I need to ask this person, because you
Mhm.
don't want to be asking them, you know, 2 days before. Now you might have a leader that could handle that or whatever, but you know your leaders and stuff like that. And then if you're a leader, okay, if you're a volunteer leader or you're a student who believes you have the gift of teaching and you've been affirmed in that, and all those things, like if you know your youth pastor is going to be preaching, go to them and be like, hey, what can I do to help? Lead up in that way. How can I support you? Because as pastors, we wrestle with this tension of, I don't want to ask too much of people and overwhelm people, but I also don't want to like not ask people to do things because like like I need to have control or whatever, right? And so there's this tension that we're always balancing. And so if you come in and go like, hey, can I take that off your plate, like
Mhm.
that's huge. And also if your pastor is, not willing, maybe, do you have a way to lead up and go, hey, I just want to make sure you're doing good. I don't want you to get burned out. Like, you can actually care for your youth pastor in that way.
Yeah.
And that's a great way to lead through, that 412 model of equipping others. And so youth pastor, equip people to do it. Who do you have around you? I spent my first probably 4 or 5 years in ministry where if I wasn't there, youth group didn't happen. And man, that's a
Mhm.
miss. That's a huge miss.
Right.
I don't think, now this is not a knock. I don't want to be, you know, condescending in any way, but if you're preaching and then you cancel youth group because of that, man, I think that's a miss. I do.
Yeah.
And I say that graciously, but like, if you're canceling because you're preaching on Sunday, like what you're communicating to your students is that, big church is more important than them.
Mhm.
And not saying like you don't have to preach, let somebody else teach or do something differently or whatever, but don't cancel youth group just because you're preaching in big church.
Yeah, and you can even if you have no leaders, so this is where I sit sometimes. Sometimes I have no leaders. Don't be afraid to bring in a video curriculum. I know right now, like it causes a little like fear, like video, like what? I don't want to bring in another video. But don't be afraid to bring in, a video curriculum. Don't like one of the things I love to do, and maybe this is a smaller youth group thing that works. Sometimes there's nights, and we do this over the summer a lot, where I don't really teach at all. The
Mm,
students come together, we play a game. Sometimes we have some worship if I have someone who can lead it. But really, we just have a time where we just get together, we hang out, we enjoy food with one another, fellowship with one another. And let me tell you, those are some of my most cherished times that I have with the youth group, because one, it feels like, wow, all I have to do is just hang out with students. That's
right.
it. And the students have told me so many times over the summer, they're like, we're so happy we have youth group over the summer, but we're really happy it's like low key. It's like dialed back. We can just come out here and not really think like, oh man, like Shay's gonna like try and save us again tonight with his preaching. Like, no, like we're just here to relax, have fun, because we're a family also, if
Hmm.
you're saved. So I just try to, find those different nights. And then as a leader, if you're sitting here thinking, hearing that, like, I would love to do that, but I don't know what to teach on. I don't know what to do. I've got two things for you. Ready? One, download youthministry.com.
Yep.
Literally, they have a ton of standalone one-off messages you can buy. And I've had a leader do this who just read the manuscript word for word and obviously changed her stories out for her, changed the stories written in there for her stories. But I mean, she read it word for word and not a student cared. They still loved it. They loved this leader, and she was respected here. So that's one thing you do. Download youthministry.com, and if you're not a gold member on there, go be a gold member,
Why
especially right
not?
now. It's free
Yeah.
for 60 days, I think it is. So take advantage of that.
Sidekick alone is worth everything. I mean,
Yes,
sidekick alone
yes, that's an episode. How do we use Sidekick kind of
for
thing like
sure.
that. But the second thing, we talked about telling your story. Don't be afraid to just get up there and just share your testimony. How did you come to Christ?
Yeah.
Students love to hear those stories. And if you're like my wife, and I say that out loud because I tell her this all the time. She goes, "Man, Shay, like you have such an awesome testimony. You went from like selling drugs and doing pot and going to parties to like here's where you are now. Like that's so cool." Like I'm like, "Yeah, that's cool, but now that I have a son, I don't want that to be my son's testimony."
Yeah.
Plus, the thing is not like the magical, like awesome thing is not I was doing this and now I'm doing this. The awesome thing is that I was dead and Jesus rose me to life. So
Right.
that's what you tap into and share. Even if you're I was saved when I was 3 kind of thing. Like what about you has grown you and brought you to this point? So that's just another resource that you can do.
And that
Uh,
story
you want
is going
to.
to connect with people too, right? I mean,
Right.
that's my wife's story. She grew up in the church, and she, she had really kind of was always following Jesus, right?
Yeah.
And there are people in there that are grew up in the church, and they're going, well, does my story matter? And every story matters, because all of our
Right.
stories are unified under what you just said, right? We were dead, and then we were alive because of Jesus. And that right there
Exactly.
is a miracle in and of itself. And that story is amazing. And people just want to hear people's stories. I mean, I know this is a little side note, but when I go to concerts, like if I want to listen to music, I'll listen on like, Spotify or whatever, like to listen to music. I can listen to music wherever. I love going to concerts to hear people talk. Like,
Mhm.
and I know that's weird, maybe. I don't know. Maybe it's
Yeah.
because I'm over 30 now. But like, I love to go hear their stories, like 10th Avenue North, Mike Donahue's story. Like, he's such a good storyteller. I love hearing those things. People love hearing stories. And so maybe it's just implementing on weeks that you preach testimony time where people can share
Yeah.
their testimony. I mean,
Right.
that's powerful. I know our denomination's camp, I think it's Tuesdays at camp during the summer. The D team, the disciple team, the students that go up there,
Yeah.
they have Testimony Tuesday, and they just go and people get to share their testimony, and students
Mm,
eat it up. They love it because they
right.
love hearing people's story about how God has changed people's life.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's just so key. So don't be afraid to share your testimony. Those are just two, I mean, dare I say, easy ways to
yeah.
step in and lead for your youth pastors. Those are just super simple ways to do it.
Hmm.
And I would just encourage you to jump in and do that. But hey, guys, thank you again so much for listening to this episode of the 412 podcast. Feel free to go ahead and subscribe to us on Facebook, or subscribe to us on YouTube. I don't think we even have
We
a
don't have a
Facebook
Facebook. We
page.
should get a Facebook though.
We should,
Yeah,
because then we can do live on Facebook if we
yeah, we
want to.
could.
But and we can do that here on Zoom. And so subscribe to us on YouTube at the 412 Podcast, and then you could also find us on Instagram at 412equip.com, or just at 412equip. We don't have a website. I don't know why I said .com. You'll find. I promise all those will be in the show notes below. I'm totally butchering all this.
Oh
Uh,
man, we need to be done.
we do. So, guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the 412 Podcast. As always, my name is Shay. Thank you again for tuning in.
Yeah, and I'm Tyler, and you stay saucy. There you go.
Stay saucy. I like it.
Bye.